Welcome to the Solicitation Evaluation, Selection, and Award Process online training video. The purpose of this training is to ensure evaluators, subject matter experts, and others involved in the solicitation evaluation have the knowledge required to successfully complete the evaluation process. This video will take approximately 50 minutes and includes 5 review questions. Completion of this training video will earn you 1 training hour of credit, which can be used toward meeting the Leadership Development Rule. Information on how to obtain a completion certificate is provided at the end. Completion of this training seminar and obtaining the training certificate are required prior to serving as an evaluator for the Division of Purchasing. Completion will also be automatically added to your training log in ESS. Now, let's get started. Now that you have been selected to serve on an evaluation committee, you may have questions about what the next steps are. This training is designed to give you an overview of the evaluation process utilized by purchasing and to explain what will be required of you as an evaluator. The Division of Purchasing, referred to as Purchasing in this training, is responsible for the procurement of all supplies, materials, equipment, and services required by all executive branch state agencies except for those agencies exempted by law. Purchasing's professional procurement staff is organized into 4 distinct procurement teams. The Commodities team is responsible for the procurement of supplies and equipment. The Services team is responsible for the procurement of professional and general services. The IT team is responsible for the procurement of information technology and telecommunication equipment and services. The Contract Management team is responsible for purchasing's contract compliance monitoring, department key contract health check reviews, and contract management training. Agencies are delegated authority by the Office of Administration to handle non-IT procurements under $50,000 and IT procurements that are $100,000 and under. For purchases with annual expenditures under $10,000 that are not on a current contract can be purchased without bidding. Agencies must bid anything over the no-bid limit. When the dollar value reaches $50,000 for a non-IT purchase or exceeds $100,000 for an IT purchase, the agency must submit those to purchasing to bid. You will need to become familiar with some purchasing terminology. Procurement staff in purchasing is defined as a buyer. Purchasing's standard definition of vendor is the person or organization that responds to a request for proposal, which is an RFP, or an invitation for bid, which is an IFB. The term solicitation refers to the IFB and RFP procurement methods. The term bid refers to the response received from a vendor in response to an IFB, and the term proposal refers to the response received from a vendor in response to an RFP. The term agency means the statutory unit of state government in the state of Missouri for which the equipment, supplies, or services are being procured by purchasing. It is also important to be aware of 4 words used in solicitation documents. The words must and shall mean that a certain feature, component, or action is a mandatory condition. The word should means that a certain feature, component, and or action is desirable but not mandatory. The word may means that a certain feature, component, or action is permissible but not required. The 6 basic steps utilized in the purchasing process are 1. Identify need and conduct research. 2. Determine procurement method. 3. Develop specifications, scope of work. 4. Solicit and evaluate bids. 5. Award contract. And 6. Administer contract. We will take a more in-depth look at each step. The first step of the process happens when the agency identifies a need for a particular product or service. This is the who, what, when, where, why, how phase. Here, the agency will need to determine the most cost-effective solution to meet their need, such as whether repair or replacement of a piece of equipment is the best solution. The agency will also have to determine if the need can be fulfilled internally or externally. If the product or service will be obtained externally, the agency must determine if a competitive procurement process is required based on the product or service's estimated dollar value and whether the product or service needed is already on an existing contract. If the agency determines that the product or service will be obtained through a competitive procurement, the agency may need to use a variety of research methods to gather information about the needed product or service, such as by surveying end users, conducting product research or demonstrations, researching peer states to see what good looks like, checking with trade associations, or issuing a request for information document to potential vendors before proceeding to the second step of the purchasing process. During the second step, the agency and the buyer work together to determine the appropriate solicitation method to be used for the competitive procurement process. An invitation for bid, or IFB, is a formal request to vendors to submit sealed bids. IFB specifications are detailed, specific, and provide limited flexibility on the part of the vendors to design the solution. Bids submitted in response to an IFB must be written, sealed, and delivered to purchasing through Missouri Buys, the state of Missouri's e-procurement system, by the date and time specified in the IFB. The names of each vendor, as well as their pricing and other information, such as brand names, are read at a public bid opening and are published through Missouri Buys. IFB responses are available for public review after the bid opening. Evaluation of the bids is typically based on specification compliance and cost rather than subjective non-cost criteria. Awards are made to the vendor whose bid complies with all mandatory specifications and requirements of the IFB and is the lowest and best bid considering price, responsibility of the vendor, and all other considerations specified in the IFB. A request for proposal, or RFP, is a formal request for sealed proposals. It has weighted evaluation categories and uses an adjectival evaluation and scoring process. An RFP is used for complex requirements where the focus is on a solution or outcome through the use of performance or outcome-based specifications rather than design or technical specifications. Generally, with an RFP, the vendor has greater flexibility in helping craft a solution. Proposals submitted in response to an RFP must be written, sealed, and delivered to purchasing through Missouri Buys by the date and time specified in the RFP. The names and addresses of each vendor are read at a public bid opening, and the vendor names are published through Missouri Buys. However, proposals are not available for public review after bid opening. The proposals and all evaluation findings remain a closed record until an award is made or all proposals are rejected. An award is made to the vendor whose proposal complies with all mandatory specifications and requirements of the RFP and is the lowest and best proposal considering price and all other evaluation categories specified in the RFP. For purposes of this training, we will be focusing on the RFP procurement process and the adjectival evaluation and scoring process. In the third step, the agency identifies the specifications for the needed product or service. The RFP specifications or scope of work must be described with generic and functional terminology and must identify any desired or required characteristics or minimums of the needed product or service. Additionally, the specifications should identify any minimum qualifications of the vendor and the vendor's personnel. As part of the specification development process, the agency is asked to give consideration to the adjectival evaluation process. In order to prepare for the adjectival evaluation process, the agency identifies those features, components, and actions related to the needed product or service in the scope of work that are most important to the agency, then prioritizes their relative importance by assigning weight to each of these identified elements to be considered in the evaluation of each vendor's technical proposal. The technical proposal is broken down into the higher level evaluation categories, and each evaluation category is further divided into individual evaluation criteria elements. The agency and purchasing work together to craft definitions for achieving each of the adjectival ratings of distinctive, superior, satisfactory, marginal, and unsatisfactory that will be used when evaluating the vendor's technical proposal based upon the specific evaluation category elements and their priority point values corresponding to those ratings. Once the specifications have been identified and the elements for the adjectival evaluation processes have been determined, the agency submits the specifications and evaluation elements to purchasing for the next step of the procurement process. The fourth step, solicit and evaluate bids, begins with purchasing developing the RFP based upon the agency's requirements and specifications. The RFP itself outlines for the vendors 1. All of the requirements of the product or service being procured. 2. Provides instructions to the vendors for preparing and submitting their proposals. And 3. Describes how the proposals will be evaluated. Once finalized, the RFP is issued by purchasing to the vendors in Missouri Buys to request their response, also known as their proposal. The RFP is publicly posted on the Missouri Buys bid board and available free of charge for downloading. If the value of the procurement is estimated at $100,000 or more for non-IT procurements, and if the value for an IT procurement that is estimated over $150,000, the procurement is advertised in 2 daily newspapers at least 5 days prior to the bid opening. Following the issuance of the RFP, purchasing prepares for the evaluation of the proposals. Purchasing is responsible for the evaluation of proposals, the selection of the successful vendor, and the contract award. Purchasing may either conduct the evaluation itself or appoint persons to evaluate and make a recommendation for the contract award. If an evaluation committee is utilized, the evaluation committee is selected prior to the bid opening date. The evaluation committee can be any size, but is usually comprised of 3 or more evaluators. The evaluation committee is typically comprised of state staff and may include a mixture of individuals from several departments having diverse but relevant backgrounds and relevant areas of subject matter expertise, but evaluators can be non-state employees. The evaluation committee is generally chosen based on the evaluator's knowledge of the product or services being procured, their individual expertise, and their ability to be objective. To avoid any appearance of inappropriate influence, no combination of a supervisor and their subordinate can be voting members on the same evaluation committee. Likewise, evaluators with a real or perceived conflict of interest with a particular vendor cannot be on the evaluation committee. Prior to the bid opening date, purchasing may hold a pre-proposal conference with the vendors. The RFP will identify whether a pre-proposal conference will be held along with scheduling details. The buyer will lead the pre-proposal conference to review the solicitation document and allow vendors the opportunity to pose questions or ask for clarifications regarding the solicitation document. The department will have appropriate staff available to participate with the buyer in addressing vendor questions. The pre-proposal conference can be conducted in a face-to-face meeting or via teleconference or a combination of the two. The pre-proposal conference is typically used for large or complex solicitations, but may be used for others. Vendors are advised during the pre-proposal conference that the state's only official position is what is in the written solicitation or addendum thereto. If the evaluation committee has already been selected, the buyer may invite the evaluation committee members to attend the pre-proposal conference. However, the individuals should not identify themselves as an evaluator during the conference. Prior to the evaluation of the proposals, it is very important that all evaluators read the RFP to obtain a clear understanding of the scope of work and the evaluation categories and evaluation elements contained in the document. The buyer will provide you with a copy of the RFP to read prior to your review of the proposals. Because the RFP process allows competitive negotiations to take place during the evaluation process, proposals and evaluation efforts remain confidential after bid opening and throughout the evaluation process, except for the names and locations of responding vendors. Those are made public after bid opening. However, after the evaluation is complete, all proposals, evaluation documents, and other related documents become public record and are available for public review following the award of the contract or the rejection of proposals. As an evaluator, you must agree to maintain the confidentiality of the proposals that will be given to you for review, as well as the committee's evaluation of the proposals during the evaluation process. To confirm your understanding, and with this requirement for confidentiality, the buyer will require you to read, sign, if you can agree, and submit a confidentiality conflict of interest agreement form before receiving copies of the proposals. It is inappropriate for an evaluator to discuss any aspect of the evaluation process with others that are not a part of the evaluation committee and who have not completed a confidentiality conflict of interest agreement form. However, if individuals within your organization might potentially need to be briefed about the proposals or the evaluation, please speak with the buyer before proceeding. If approved, the buyer will request a completed confidentiality conflict of interest agreement form from that individual before information may be shared with them. Likewise, it is inappropriate for an evaluator to discuss any aspect of a current evaluation process with a vendor. However, as part of the evaluation process, the buyer may arrange for the responding vendors to have communication with the evaluation committee, such as in a question and answer conference, interview, or system demonstration, which will be arranged and led by the buyer with the evaluators present so that all evaluators can benefit from the communication, except for these communications with vendors arranged by the buyer or for communications with the vendor regarding a completely separate current contract issue. It is not appropriate for you to have direct communication with any of the vendors related to the procurement. Any attempt by a vendor to have direct or indirect communication with you outside of the evaluation committee process regarding the procurement should be avoided and reported to the buyer. As an evaluator, you should report to the buyer immediately any attempts by others to improperly influence you to favor or disfavor a particular vendor, whether by a vendor or by others that have an interest in the evaluation outcome. Although you may have signed a confidentiality conflict of interest agreement form, You may not fully realize a potential conflict until after the proposals are opened and all vendors and their proposed subcontractors are identified. Therefore, upon discovery of an actual conflict of interest, or even the appearance of a conflict of interest exists, you must immediately disclose such to purchasing. Purchasing must avoid even the appearance of impropriety in the evaluation process and must ensure the evaluation of proposals is fair to all vendors. Therefore, purchasing must be made aware of the potential conflict of interest in order to make any necessary adjustments to the evaluation committee. If it is determined that a conflict of interest exists for an evaluator, that person cannot serve as an evaluator, and the buyer will need to obtain a replacement evaluator or proceed with the remaining evaluators. An example of a potential conflict of interest is a situation in which an evaluator's family members owns or works for a business that is competing for a state contract as a prime contractor or as a subcontractor to the prime. In accordance with the Code of State Regulations 1 CSR 40-1.050 10-0, purchasing employees, evaluators, and any other persons involved in procurement decisions are prohibited from accepting for personal benefit gifts, meals, trips, or any other items of significant value or of a monetary advantage from a vendor. Purchasing monitors all procurement activities to detect any possibility of deliberate restraint of competition, collusion, price fixing, or any other anti-competitive conduct that appears to violate state and federal antitrust laws. In the event the buyer needs to assign some specific evaluation task to a portion of the evaluation committee, a lead person will be named by the buyer. The lead person must notify the buyer of any meetings, document each meeting, and provide a report of each meeting's findings to all evaluators. Typically, prior to the bid opening date and before the evaluation committee receives the vendor's proposals, a pre-evaluation meeting is held with the evaluators by the buyer. The purpose of the pre-evaluation meeting is to 1. Discuss the adjectival evaluation process, 2. The expectations of the evaluators, and 3. To establish the evaluation schedule for a driven and focused evaluation. The evaluation of compliant proposals will be conducted in a methodical manner using the identified evaluation standards for determining the correct adjectival ratings and points. It should be noted that evaluators may be asked to adjust their schedules when necessary to meet certain deadlines. Proposals must be submitted by a duly authorized representative of the vendor's organization, contain all information required by the RFP, and be priced as required. Registered vendors must respond by the published opening date and time through Missouri Buys. Vendors may attend a formal opening of the proposals or view responding vendor names on the Missouri Buys bid board. No decision related to an award of a contract is made at the bid opening. Following the bid opening, the evaluation of the proposals must be conducted according to the evaluation plan detailed in the RFP. Typically, the technical proposal is assigned to the evaluation committee, and the buyer has responsibility for the cost proposal, MBE/WBE participation, statutory preferences, and terms and conditions. The evaluation of the technical proposal must be conducted in accordance with the evaluation categories, evaluation elements, and adjectival rating definitions and associated evaluation points published in the RFP. The evaluation categories of the technical proposal often include the assessment of a vendor's proposed methodology to satisfy the requirements of the RFP, the vendor's proposed personnel, and the vendor's past performances and experiences. The evaluation of a vendor's cost proposal will be conducted by the buyer based on the prices quoted by the vendor vendor and the cost evaluation plan outlined in the RFP. Likewise, the buyer will assess the vendor's compliance with the RFP's terms and conditions and determine if the vendor has earned MBE/WBE participation points as well as statutory preferences outlined in the RFP. If you have any questions regarding the procurement process, you should contact the buyer. Remember, the evaluation committee members must not communicate with any of the vendors during the evaluation process unless it is part of a buyer-coordinated evaluation activity. Before discussing the evaluation process further, let's discuss the roles of the buyer, the individual evaluators, and the evaluation committee and what takes place during the evaluation process. Role of the buyer. The buyer is purchasing's procurement staff member that has responsibility for the procurement and serves as a single point of contact for the vendors during the entire procurement process. The buyer will serve as the evaluation committee's non-voting chair and facilitator for evaluation committee meetings and all evaluation activity. In addition to serving as the vendor's single point of contact for the entire procurement process, the buyer serves as a procurement resource for the evaluation committee members too. You should direct all questions you may have about any aspect of the evaluation process to the buyer. The buyer will assist you in understanding your role and responsibilities. Buyers are responsible for ensuring that all applicable procurement laws, rules, and policies are followed. The buyer will also conduct the evaluation of the cost proposal and is responsible for the scoring of the vendor's proposed MBE/WBE participation and any applicable evaluation consideration for proposed Missouri Service Disabled Veteran Enterprise or Organization for the Blind Sheltered Workshop participation preference and Buy American and Missouri's in-state reciprocal preferences. Role of evaluators. As an evaluator, prior to reviewing the proposals, you should have thoroughly reviewed the RFP, particularly the scope of work and the explanation of the evaluation categories, evaluation elements, adjectival evaluation ratings, and associated scores. After reviewing the RFP, you need to thoroughly review all proposals in accordance with the requirements and priorities outlined in the RFP. The first consideration is determining whether a proposal is compliant to the RFP's mandatory requirements that are expressed as a must or shall in the RFP. You should make note of page and paragraph numbers where you believe a vendor may not be complying with the RFP's requirements. The evaluation committee as a whole will determine if the vendor is non-responsive and if competitive negotiations will be conducted to address any non-compliance issues. An award cannot be made to a non-responsive or non-compliant vendor. Vendors determined to be non-responsive after any competitive negotiations will be set aside and not evaluated further. The other portion of your review should focus on the evaluation categories and their subcategories known as evaluation elements and their relative priority, as you can see by the RFP's weighting of each. The details of the adjectival ratings for each evaluation element are detailed in one of the RFP's attachments. You will need to consider each proposal according to each of the evaluation elements and determine which of the defined adjectival ratings for the given evaluation category align with the vendor's proposal for each individual evaluation element. The points are predetermined in the same RFP attachment for each element rating. As you identify the appropriate rating, make note of why you selected that rating so that you can provide your justification during the evaluation committee discussion. Role of the evaluation committee. The role of the evaluation committee is to evaluate the technical proposal and, when combined with the buyer's evaluation of the cost proposal, MWBE participation, and statutory preferences, make a recommendation for contract award to the buyer. In a roundtable fashion, the committee gives consideration to each evaluator's individual assessment of the proposals using the adjectival rating definitions set out in the RFP. If the evaluation committee is in agreement after discussing as a committee and is able to reach a consensus on the adjectival ratings and associated scoring for the evaluation elements for each vendor, then one consensus report and point scoring can be prepared for the evaluation committee. However, evaluators should never feel pressured to agree in order to achieve a consensus. If the evaluation committee is unable to reach a consensus, then each evaluator will provide separate adjectival ratings, scores, and narratives. Replacement of evaluators. Sometimes due to unexpected absences or an identified conflict of interest, it may become necessary for a particular evaluator to be removed as a member of the evaluation committee. The buyer will determine whether replacement with another evaluator is appropriate or if the evaluation will continue with the remaining evaluators. When evaluating proposals, you will be expected to perform a fair, impartial, objective, and professional evaluation of the proposals and exercise independent judgment. You have been entrusted with an essential part of an important public decision. Exercise your judgment in a manner that is not dependent on anyone else's opinions or wishes. Further, remain objective as you review each proposal and do not prejudge a proposal until it has been completely evaluated. The evaluation process must provide fair competition. After the bid opening, the buyer will provide an electronic copy of each of the proposals to all evaluators through SharePoint or similar medium. Prior to the first evaluation meeting, the evaluator is responsible for reading each proposal. The evaluator should understand the facts of each proposal and assess the proposal's compliance with RFP requirements. Therefore, proposals may require more than one reading by the evaluator. While reviewing the proposals, the evaluator should take note of any proposals that contain statements that are confusing or deficient in being compliant with a mandatory must or shall requirement of the RFP, such as not meeting the minimum number of years of experience required in the RFP or not possessing a required license. Non-compliance or non-responsiveness exists when a proposal contains deficiencies which do not comply with mandatory requirements of the RFP. Contract awards cannot be made to non-compliant proposals. However, since clarification of a vendor's intent may be sought and since vendors may be given the opportunity to correct their deficiencies during competitive negotiations, the evaluator is advised to make note of the deficiencies for discussion during the upcoming evaluation meeting, but continue reviewing the proposal. The final determination of the responsiveness or non-responsiveness of a proposal will be made later in the evaluation process by the evaluation committee as a whole after any negotiations have been completed. After having gained an understanding of the facts of each vendor's proposal and any of its compliance deficiencies, each evaluator should individually and independently assign an initial adjectival rating for each specific element of the identified evaluation categories for each proposal, consistent with the RFP adjectival rating definitions and associated points. In reviewing the proposals, each evaluator must be able to support why they assign the specific adjectival rating for each evaluation element based on facts from the vendor's proposal. Remember, evaluation documents, including any notes by an evaluator, are considered public records after the contract award. During the initial evaluation meeting, the evaluation committee will discuss individual evaluator findings regarding compliance in a roundtable discussion format. The committee as a whole will identify any areas within a vendor's proposal that need clarification, as well as any areas where a proposal is deficient in meeting mandatory, must and shall requirements of the RFP. If clarification of a vendor's intent is needed, the buyer will pursue such clarification in writing. Additionally, if areas of deficiency are identified, a determination will be made as to whether competitive negotiations need to be pursued or if the evaluation should proceed without negotiations. Following the compliance review, the evaluation committee will discuss individual evaluator initial adjectival ratings they have assigned to each proposal for each evaluation element and their justification explaining why they chose the selected adjectival rating in a roundtable discussion format. Initially, individual evaluators may have differing adjectival ratings. The evaluation committee should discuss their thoughts further as to how well a vendor aligns with a particular evaluation category and element. As a result of the evaluation committee's discussion and hearing the individual justification provided, it is permissible but not required for you to change your judgment about which adjectival rating you believe should be awarded to a vendor. If the evaluation committee members reach a consensus on the scoring for the evaluation elements, then a consensus evaluation report can be prepared. However, it is important to ensure that you exercise independent judgment. It is not permissible for evaluators to force another evaluator to either favor or disfavor a particular proposal or group of proposals, since the evaluation would not then be based upon the independent judgment of the individual evaluators. In addition, the evaluation committee will discuss the need for on-site presentations, question-answer conferences, site visits, reference checks, product samples, product demonstrations, and negotiations. If it is determined that the evaluation committee needs to meet with the vendors, the buyer will schedule and lead such communications with the vendors with the evaluation committee. If it is determined that it is in the state's best interest to negotiate with those vendors submitting potentially acceptable proposals, the buyer will issue a request for a best and final offer, BAFO, to the vendors. The process is never initiated by a vendor's request for an opportunity to submit a BAFO. Additionally, the RFP explains to vendors there is no guarantee the state will conduct negotiations. The state may also conduct more than one round of best and final offers. The BAFO request letter will identify areas of noncompliance and areas of clarification found within a vendor's proposal that need to be addressed by the vendor. As part of the BAFO process, purchasing may revise RFP provisions, provided the changes do not significantly alter the original intent and scope of the RFP. If significant alterations are needed, the RFP may need to be rebid. The BAFO request letter will identify any such RFP revisions that the vendor needs to review and address. The BAFO request sent to the vendors will specify the date and time by which the BAFO needs to be returned to purchasing. If a vendor does not submit a BAFO or request to withdraw their proposal, the vendor's original or last BAFO response version of their proposal is considered the vendor's best and final offer. Following any scheduled vendor communications such as a system demonstration and after completion of any negotiations, subsequent evaluation meetings may be held to discuss the additional information learned from communications with the vendor and from the negotiation process. The evaluation committee can then complete their evaluation of the proposals, including the final determination of responsiveness and final technical proposal evaluations. If the evaluation committee reaches a consensus, the buyer will compile the committee's collective findings into one single draft evaluation that reflects the evaluation committee's adjectival rating assigned for each evaluation element of the RFP's technical proposals evaluation categories and the associated rationale as to why each particular rating was assigned. The buyer will send the draft evaluation to the evaluation committee for their review and comment. The evaluation committee should review the evaluation to ensure it is an accurate representation of the evaluation committee's findings and aligns with the RFP's established evaluation plan. If a consensus is not reached, each individual evaluator follows the same process for their individual evaluation write-up. Once the evaluation is complete and accurate, the buyer will present the evaluation report form to the evaluation committee. The evaluation report form provides a listing of the individual evaluation categories, the maximum points possible for each evaluation category, and the points awarded to each vendor for the evaluation categories. The evaluation committee should review the evaluation report form to ensure the agreement of the scores on the evaluation report form with the adjectival ratings in the evaluation document. Once the evaluation committee is satisfied with the evaluation document and evaluation report form, each evaluator signs and dates the evaluation report form. If a consensus is not reached, each individual evaluator follows the same process for their individual report form. If the evaluation committee is unable to reach a consensus on selected adjectival ratings, then each evaluator will provide separate adjectival ratings, scores, and narratives in lieu of a consensus adjectival rating, score, and rationale. The individual evaluator's scores for each evaluation element will be combined with cost and other evaluation considerations determine the individual evaluator's vote for lowest and best vendor. While the evaluation committee evaluates the technical proposal, the buyer is evaluating the vendor's cost proposal, their MBE/WBE participation, and all statutory preferences that are applicable to the procurement. Compliance issues with cost proposals or terms and conditions are identified by the buyer during the evaluation committee's compliance review of technical proposals and are addressed in any best and final offers that are requested. Following any negotiations, the cost evaluation, the MWBE participation evaluation, and the Missouri Service Disabled Veteran Enterprise Preference, Organization for the Blind Sheltered Workshop Preference, Missouri Domestic Products Procurement Act Preference, known as the Buy American Preference, and Missouri's In-State Reciprocal Preference evaluations are finalized by purchasing. The points for these considerations are not shared with evaluators until after their technical proposal evaluation and scoring are complete in order to avoid the real or perceived possibility of the cost evaluations and the other objective evaluations influencing the adjectival technical proposal evaluation process. The total points awarded by the evaluation committee for the technical proposal based on the evaluation committee's adjectival evaluation scores are combined with the points awarded by purchasing for the cost proposal, MBE/WBE participation, Missouri Service Disabled Veteran Preference, and the Organization for the Blind Sheltered Workshop Preference to determine the lowest and best proposal recommended for award. If agreement with the committee's recommendation, purchasing submits the evaluation and recommendation to the agency for final review and approval to proceed with the contract award. If the agency is in agreement, purchasing proceeds with the contract award. A decision may be made to reject all proposals received. Reasons to reject might include none of the proposals met the specifications of the RFP, the agency's needs were not met with any of the proposed solutions, the prices received were not reasonable or exceeded the budget amount, or there was insufficient competition. Purchasing will provide a written justification for the procurement file whenever a decision is made to reject all proposals. Purchasing will notify all vendors that responded to the solicitation and share the justification. A new solicitation process may then be initiated, or the RFP solicitation may be canceled with no further action taken. In the fifth step of the process, purchasing makes the award. The contract is made to the vendor submitting the lowest and best proposal as determined in accordance with the evaluation categories published in the RFP. Purchasing reserves the right to make multiple awards. Let's look at what goes into the award process. Email notification of award decisions will be sent to each vendor if provided an email address when submitting their proposal. After the contract award is made, the proposals, the evaluation documents, the contract awards, and all other contents of the procurement file become open records. The official bid file and contract file will be imaged and made available through Purchasing's Awarded Bid and Contract Document Search webpage. Additionally, the resulting contract, which includes the state's RFP and the awarded vendor's response, is available on Missouri Buy's Public Contract Board. Only those documents and information exempted by law can be considered confidential and exempt from becoming public information. Official open records requests received after contract award could include but are not limited to any evaluation committee correspondence, notes, and emails. Purchasing regulations provide for a 10 business day protest period for vendors. Protesting vendors have the opportunity to review the entire bid file, including but not limited to the evaluation committee's evaluation narrative and scoring, the cost evaluation, and any preference evaluation considerations. A bid protest must be submitted in writing and must be received by purchasing within 10 business days after the date of award. Purchasing reviews the protest and prepares a written determination of the protest. However, in preparing a response to the protest, purchasing may contact evaluators for insight regarding one or more of the issues being protested. The determination will contain findings of fact, an analysis of the protest, and a conclusion that the protest will be either sustained or denied. If the protest is sustained, remedies could include canceling the award and rebidding. If the protest is denied, no further action will be taken by purchasing, and the agency may proceed with using the contract. The last step of the procurement process is contract administration. Once the contract has been awarded by purchasing, the contractor will begin to work directly with the personnel of the agency for whom the supplies, equipment, or services were procured. The agency is responsible for coordinating activities with the contractor. Those activities can include 1. Fulfilling any state obligations to the contractor, 2. Assessing and addressing the contractor's performance against the contract requirements, and 3. Making payments to the contractor for delivered products and or services. Normally, purchasing does not participate in day-to-day contract administration of individual contracts except 1. In cases of the contractor's failure to perform according to the contract, 2. When the contract must be modified or renew, or 3. When specific contract requirements stipulate direct reporting to purchasing. It is important that the agency monitor and document any performance concerns to the contractor in writing, so the contractor is aware of what provisions of the contract they may be failing to fulfill. The agency is advised to keep purchasing's contract management team informed of these performance issues and concerns, particularly those that could rise to the level of a breach of contract. This breach could disrupt the delivery of the needed products and services and require remedial action, which could include resulting in early cancellation or termination of the contract. The contract management team will work collectively with the agency and the contractor to ensure compliance with contractual requirements for the successful delivery of products and services. This is the end of the solicitation, evaluation, selection, and award process online training video. Purchasing thanks you for your willingness to serve on an evaluation committee. Please contact the buyer in purchasing with any questions regarding the specific evaluation. The following slides contain review questions and answers. At the end of the review questions, you will be directed how to obtain a training certificate. It is important that you obtain a certificate indicating completion, since you will be requested to have one on file in order to serve on an evaluation committee. We are now going to test your knowledge of the evaluation and award process by going through some questions. You do not need to do anything, as this video will go through each question and answer. Question 1. An evaluator may communicate directly with any vendor regarding questions about the proposal. True or false? The answer is false. Remember that no evaluator should communicate with a vendor during the evaluation process. All communication must go through the buyer. Question 2. An evaluator serving on an evaluation committee cannot exercise their own judgment when evaluating proposals. True or false? The answer is false. The evaluator must exercise their own judgment and must not be influenced by anyone about the evaluation. Question 3. A proposal is non-responsive if the proposal contains deficiencies which do not comply with the mandatory requirements of the RFP. True or false? The answer is true. If the proposal does not meet all of the mandatory requirements, the proposal could be potentially non-responsive and removed from evaluation consideration. Question 4. Which of the following statements regarding the adjectival evaluation process is not true? A. The features, components, and actions most important to the agency are identified in the RFP. B. During the evaluation meeting, an evaluator cannot change their initial adjectival rating. Or C. The adjectival ratings are defined and the corresponding point values are provided in the RFP. The answer is B. An evaluator can change their initial adjectival rating during the evaluation process. Question 5. One of the 6 steps of the purchasing process is A. Attending trade shows to find potential bidders. B. Contract administration. Or C. Develop a vendor manual. The answer is B. Contract administration is the 6th step in the purchasing process. This is the end of the review. Thank you for your time watching the online training video and going through the review questions. The training completion will be added to your training log in ESS. However, the Division of Purchasing will be generating the certificates on a weekly basis. If proof of completing this training is a rush, please take a screenshot from your My Learning history of the solicitation evaluation video, including the completed date, and email the screenshot to perchmail@oa.mo.gov, and a certificate will be sent to you.